I'm going to speak today a little bit more from the heart. Is that okay? Cool. There's like one person. It's cool. I'm going to speak a little bit more from the heart. And happy July 4th. Glad you're here. And we've been in this series for a bit about this journey inward, this path towards transformation and towards healing, whatever that means to each of us. In the last couple of weeks, we've talked about the story of Naaman. We've looked at his life, and we've seen some marks of transformation and what change happens through his life. Last week, we looked at the life of Peter. And I want to continue talking in that vein about wholeness, about healing, about trust, about transformation. And I also want to level up the conversation and talk a little bit about what that means for us as a church family, about who exactly we are and who we're intended to become for the sake of real people, or the sake of one another, and for the sake of our community. And just lay some footwork for what you're going to hear more and more in the coming months, because God has huge things in front of us. And it's a fight to get there through the journey of our own maps towards healing and towards wholeness. And so I've had a question stirring in throughout this series for the last few weeks. And one of the things that I've just been inwardly reflecting on, thinking about, and I even had a conversation with someone yesterday that kind of brought it back to the surface. And here's my question. And I want to just bring this to you and riff off of this today. And the question is this: is transformation optional? That's great to talk about healing. It's great to talk about transformation. It's great to talk about wholeness. It's great to talk about these things that go deeper and all the warm fuzzies and the possibility of this Christian life and whatever that means for us. But ultimately, is that just kind of the thing that only a few people have access to, and that's what the good super Christians get? Or maybe you're like, I don't have one of those epic testimonies that is a good share it from, at the small group where it leads to weeping and tears and clear distinct. What is transformation just optional? Or is it okay to just kind of, say yes and pray the prayer and do some good things for the rest of our life and come on Sundays and do the boxes and avoid certain things and try to be loving? Is transformation optional? And in the story of Naaman and in the story of Peter, they each gave us some examples that speak to this. Think about Naaman. If you haven't been around, short story, Naaman's a guy that has it all together on the outside. On the inside, he has leprosy. And he didn't want to be humbled and go about the journey of what it meant to transform and to change. But God still healed him. Peter was a guy that struggled to go back and forth between the things that brought him comfort, the thing that brought him security, the things that brought him stability, things that we named last week as the false self versus the true self that he had in Jesus. It was an identity struggle, and he kept going back to fishing. But we see some things. And in Naaman's life, his trigger was some sort of kind of profound moment of crisis or disruption. There was the day that he discovered that for all the good that was happening in his life and what it looked like on the outside, that he actually had leprosy. And leprosy had an end date. It was a terminal thing. It wasn't just uncomfortable. It had terminal implications. And Peter was triggered by a different sort of situation. Peter has this long journey of back and forth, start, restart, failure, forgiveness, restoration. And then God uses Peter to be the dude that kind of unlocks this Christian movement we call the church that led to, out of 3 guys around Jesus, 12, 120, now billions of followers of Jesus. What is in that? What was Peter's trigger? And Peter's trigger was ultimately around trust. Do I trust this Jesus guy? Or do I go trust myself back to fishing? So Naaman's having a crisis, a slow developing crisis, and Peter is struggling to trust Jesus or trust himself. And for Peter, it wasn't just between Jesus and fishing. It was Jesus' promises versus his own promises to himself. It was also about restoring the trust after he failed, but it was more than that. And I want to talk about this in a few minutes at the level of our church. It was also about trusting what was being entrusted to him. Because it wasn't just for Peter that, hey, I'm going to trust Jesus and get my healing and quit fishing and make a difference, but it was about actually walking in and stepping into a much larger vision for life and influence and impact that's going to unlock and help change the world that was actually being entrusted to him. Because how many of you know that on the other side often of crisis or failure or trust is the invitation and opportunity to greater influence in and through your life? And for each one of those guys, at some point, the idea of, is transformation optional, shifted from an option to actually their only option. It wasn't simply because things had gotten bad or spiraled out of control and that they just needed some stabilization. It was actually this. It was that they experienced the living God. It was because they saw what was possible. It was because they experienced something that no thing or no one could have manufactured up for them. Here's what I'm trying to say. They were transformed not just to survive, but actually to thrive. Some of us are in a journey of this healing transformation thing where it's survival. It is survival. Others are maybe on the next side, and you're trying to trust what God is trying to entrust to you. You're trying to trust the bigger opportunity, the bigger influence. I feel like there's that journey mapping in the life of our church. And they transformed because God, listen, he captured every essence of who they were. He captured them. They were encountered by him. They were inspired, enveloped. They were captured by a vision, an encounter, a relationship. And they said that nothing could ever be the same. And so let's riff off of this for a few minutes. Let's riff off of each one of those scenarios. Crisis and then opportunity. What do we do about transformation? How do we think about it? And let's set some context for a second. Do y'all remember this global trauma thing that we've been through the last 2 years that we're all acting like like it's not here anymore and it made no impact? Do you remember that thing that we walked through the last 2 years? Anybody? Yeah. We don't have any idea of the long-term impact. No one knows. You don't know. Those things that you're feeling on the inside, let's name it, because we've been through global trauma, as some people would say. And everyone's saying this is like expected to be like the busiest travel season in summer ever because it's like, nope, not happening. It's over, moving on. Let's enjoy life. But I remember, can we talk about it for a second? I know we haven't. No one likes to. But I remember reading an article when the pandemic first began, and some really smart people were talking about, on the front end, asking, hey, is this whole pandemic thing, is this a blizzard? Is this a winter? Or is this an ice age? Meaning, is this like a quick thing that's going to be disruptive, but over quick like a blizzard? Really impactful, may get snowed in for days or weeks. Life's going to get like 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Like, is it going to be a blizzard? Or is it going to be a winter? No, we didn't get it right, and it's going to be unseasonably long. Or is it an ice age, which is like a permanent change to the ecosystem, to the way of being human that lasts for hundreds of years, and that accelerates all the things that actually were happening under the surface. And I'm going to go ahead and say we've experienced an ice age. Welcome to the new reality. Welcome to the new sense of making sense of things. An ice age, the pandemic was and is an ice age. It was a shift. It marks a shift. It's a change. It's marking a shift in the climate for generations to come. For generations to come. The earth experiences this. It gets unseasonably hot, unseasonably low, ice age, whatever, global warming. These things happen. It's trackable. It's happened. And what happens? Everything adapts. And it takes generations and hundreds of years to come back. The pandemic we've experienced the last 2 years is like that. And my sense of things, can I get just like, I don't know if you call this prophetic or just making stuff up. But my sense of things is like these last 2 years, within a decade or two, we won't even like recognize, like this wasn't the moment. This isn't the moment. The moment's coming because the world has changed. The way of being human has changed. The global levels of anxiety has changed. People have been weaponized. They've changed. Trust in institutions has changed. Trust in one another has changed. Education has changed. Business has changed. The digital space has changed. We're in an ice age, and we don't yet know the impact. And the journey inward and towards our healing and transformation has to take that into account. They named a couple, 3 things, like what are the shifts? Economic. I remember there was an axiom that emerged in business world. If any of you own businesses, like it was transform or die, right? Think about all like the restaurants that moved to go and ghost kitchens and all the things, the new ways that we interacted. Think about the education changes that happen. Thankfully, it doesn't seem that the economic projections are as grim as once thought. But we're facing inflation and supply shortages and all that sort of stuff. So economics is one big shift. The second, and this is going to be the longest to play out, we're just naming some things this morning, is the developmental, they name it as the developmental and formation crisis in the next generation. Crisis. Let's just charitably say that, schools were shut down for a long time to prevent infection. It was different here than in other places. I can't wait for the psychology to come out on what impact that's had. But one of the things that we know is that there's windows of time that we have developmentally. There's windows of time that you and I have developmentally to hone in on some certain skills. Let's talk about reading for a second. Most people say that between 8 years old and 10 years old is when you find reading fluency. And if it doesn't happen in that window, you adapt and you become a functional reader, but you never actually get the brain hardwired to where you're just a fluent reader and all those systems function at the same time. Think about all the kids, and I don't mean this in a blame way, we're just naming, like the kids that missed out on certain things at the hands of that. My wife's a teacher. There's teachers in the room. There's people that work with the next gen in the room. And one of the things that I hear over and over is the changes in behavior. The changes in just absolute, it seems like there's been something that's happened. One of the greater concerns of the new ice age that we face, which is if we're going to be transforming people and be used by that, we have to have context, is that just as reading fluency may be between ages 8 and 10, they're saying that social fluency may be between 13 and 15. Remember all those awkward middle school years that you had? And what you learned about how to take a joke, or how to give a joke, or how to be made fun of, or not be made, like the moments in a hallway that caused you to just figure out, I'm going to fight this person or I'm not, and I'm going to be okay with it. Like, remember all those, like I'm going to go to the dance or not go. I'm going to be asked or not. I'm going to stand on the stands or not. I'm going to find my tribe and do the thing. Like, remember all those years? Now imagine removing that for yourself and trying to become a high schooler or an adult or in an age where there's also adults that don't know how to socially relate anymore because we have these things. It's an ice age, my friends. There's a developmental social crisis happening. And then the third shift that they talked about is just a shift in trust in institutions. However your view is the handling of this at global levels, governmental levels, health organizations. But even that, we saw some really raw, profound stuff where we saw a guy murdered on video in a street in Minneapolis. And we're like, what do we do with this? And that video's there. And we got to make sense of that. We're losing trust in institutions. And all that stuff's happening up here. But then it gets into us. So I just want to say, welcome to the ice age. We are in a new reality. And the question for us, you're like, Matt, that was nice, but that's a big window over something I don't care about. Like, I just feel like I'm struggling. Well, there's reasons. Let me give you an illustration. I'm going to show you a map. This is a map from the 16th century. The Italians created this map. Imagine in the 16th century, sending people out on boats powered by wind from Europe, going out for years at a time, coming back with this. How many of you say they did a pretty decent job of, like, with no technology, no motors, no satellites, creating a fairly accurate rendering of how the world looks? Yeah? Like, I was driving yesterday, 2 days ago, and I saw a Google Earth car driving past me. I'm like, the Italians would have loved that several hundred years ago. They didn't have that, obviously. But think about this. This was like a well-funded project. It was costly. But not just costly like to money. It was costly to people died making this map. People gave their entire life to create a map that would help the world flourish and trade and know each other and do also some horrible stuff with, like people through the years. But anyways, they did that. And it's pretty impressive. But let's show the next map. You're like, yeah, that's nice, but we have this now. This is a picture from outer space. Yay, us. No one, how many of you are like, you know what? I want a more accurate picture of the world. I'm going to get on a sailboat, walk away from my family from 3 years, risk life and death to go create a map. Or I'm just going to go like, hey, Google, Earth. Western Hemisphere. And you're like, dope, got it. This is what it looked like on March 18th, 2021 at 4:54 Eastern Standard Time. And the Italians are rolling over in their grave, mad at it. But let's use this and think about that. This is pretty darn impressive. But this is the new reality. What's changed? Let's go back to the crisis of formation and development for a second. And let's go back to kids in a classroom, or kids in your home, kids in our community. Let's say that you walked into Mr. Francisco's social studies class, and he's out teaching human geography. And he is telling the kids, he's using this map to teach them how the world looks and works. And he's like, this is the best that we have. Freaking love the Italians. I love Ferraris, and I love pasta. So this is the map that we're going to use. And so he's teaching, and you walk in as a parent, and you're like, bro, that's the wrong map. We have new information. That's outdated. What are you doing? And you look at him, and eventually you're like, listen, here's the deal. If you keep using this map, it's going to lead to long-term navigational issues. Now apply that to what it means to be human in a new ice age and attempting to follow Jesus on the path of transformation and healing. And I just have to ask a question. How many of us are relying on old maps, old thought structures, old experiences, old ideas when Jesus has a clear, up-to-date picture of how to follow him and how to be healed and what it means to be humans? We are in an ice age. Your transformation is tied, first of all, to acknowledging a new reality. Acknowledge a new reality. And if we are going to love the world well, if you are going to love the world well, and if you are even going to love yourself well, you have to understand yourself and understand the world, and you need to realize it wasn't a blizzard. It's not even a winter. We are in a new world, and we have to adjust accordingly. We must transform. We must adapt. We must grieve what needs grieved. We must count the losses. Some of you need to write down the losses and weep over it and take it to Jesus and say, Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. I give you this list, as detailed as you could make it. But we also must shift our eyes and our perspective and our hearts to the opportunity that exists on the profound moment, because in the world of some Disney princess, there's a whole new world out there. Is that Aladdin? A whole new world. Jasmine, I like it. Peter kept going back to fishing. What's your fishing? What boat do you keep going back to? What sense of self do you keep relying on? What thing that is morally neutral but like the distraction mechanism for your soul do you just keep going fishing with? You get quiet long enough that some of the hurts pop up. Or you get quiet long enough and you feel the presence of God, and then it freaks you out and you immediately pick this thing up. Immediately text someone and say, hey, let's go out for drinks. Let's go hang out. Let's go golf. And God's talking to me, and that's freaking me out. Peter kept going back to fishing. And I mean this as lovingly, but as urgently as I can say it. You can't wait out this ice age. It is a fact of reality. If you're waiting for things to go back, you'll have massive navigational issues the rest of your life. If we, as a church, as parents, as people that care about families and as a community, wait for things to just go back to pre-winter days, we will miss the opportunity of the lifetime that could happen if we would just move our nets to the other side of the boat instead of fishing where we were comfortable. We can't outwait this ice age, and you and I can't keep working off of old maps. And so let me answer my own question. Is transformation optional? 1,000% it's not. Does it mean it is instant? Or that we're going to put parameters on it and like bully and guilt you into it? Absolutely not. And transformation happens most of the time, small steps over the course of a lifetime. But there always is this intentional moment, or thousands of intentional moments. It's like course correction. It's like, I know there's a new map, let me look at it again, course correct. I know there's a new map, let me look at it again, let me course correct. There's a new map, check the navigation. So let's flesh this out a bit more, and let's talk about it for you, and then let's talk about it through the lens of church, and then we're going to, I don't know what's going to happen, and then we'll leave. Bath time with my two, well, that sounds really creepy. Every night, well, not every night, because I hate bath time. Freaking blow drying 4-year-old's hair is like, anyways, teach me, Lord, patience. When we do baths with our children, give them baths from the outside. There's always this moment, help it, Lord, towards the end where you're playing the parent balance game, where you want the water to begin to drain out as a subtle cue to say, bath time is over, prepare your heart and emotions. But you're not yet done. And you also have children that love the running water, so that's their jam. You play with that, you fill up cups, you lay out your towels, you do all the things. But on the inside, you're like, would you just drain tub so that we can be done with this? And I didn't have to end it. The water literally, thanks to Jesus and gravity, left the building. There's always that act. And if you get it just right from a parent's perspective, it's always draining just a touch faster than it's filling up. From the girl's perspective, the best version is that it's filling faster than it's draining. See where I'm going with this? The effects of this ice age that we may or may not be naming is like living every day with more going out than what's coming in. And if I were to map what it feels like to be human right now based on conversations I'm having with you and just what I can read on the Google, is that everyone is depleted. People freaking, can I say that? Worn out. And we weren't exactly doing great on the reserve front prior to this whole global trauma. And we're all existing in a human moment where far more is going out than what's coming in. And when more goes out than comes in, through stress, through isolation, through even just, there's so much psychology around how people basically became weaponized because to avoid people is to avoid infection for a while. Like that changes a psyche. That we're just depleted. We're running on reserves. And we can easily just be like, oh gosh, I just need a vacation. I need a longer, we're all going to travel. And we're going to act like a 1-week thing, a weekend thing, a 2-week thing, even a month. Get away for a month. That's awesome for you. Like that's going to undo 2 years worth of stuff with a lifetime that happened behind it. And what you and I need in a new Ice Age moment is actually to readjust how we live our life so that there's a constant, steady flow of replenishing happening no matter what is getting sucked out of us through the bathtub of life. Transformation, Naaman showed us that dip. Nothing happened. Dip again, dip again, dip again. It's all these small and concrete acts, and people are tapped out. And I want you to ask, what would your answer to these questions would be? A little bit of a self-assessment thing. Do you forget yourself forgetting things more often than you ever remembered you were? Brandon Eskew told me this week that he was driving to Taze Valley from Poca, and he was at Milton before he realized where he was going and that he was coming to work that morning. I did that. You ever have a conversation with a boss or an email, and anybody that leads people, are you having to be more patient with things because they're forgetting it? And you're like, of course they're. Everyone's traumatized right now. No one wants to talk about. Do you have, is your attention span as weak as it's ever been? And it's not just because of TikTok and Reels and mindless scrolling. It's just I can't focus. You're yeah, you lost me 12 minutes ago. Do you find it harder to focus, your attention span, it's lost? Do you find yourself less patient and irritated about things that you used not to be patient about? Do you find yourself losing your mind in traffic or at the grocery store? I got corrected in the grocery parking lot a few weeks ago because I didn't take the grocery cart and push it all the way to the inside. I returned it, okay? But I just shoved it in there, and I got reamed by some sweet Karen about that I needed to push it all the way to the inside, and I chirped back, and I usually don't chirp back. And I was like, listen, Linda, listen. That's about all I got out because I usually either anyways. If you ever make me really mad, tears will come to my face because words don't come. They just boil up and they leak out through water. They come later, and then I have to fight lingering frustration and rage and all that stuff. Do you find yourself canceling plans at the last minute or being happy when other people cancel their plans at the last minute right now? How many of you have already bailed on a barbecue this weekend? What is that? What is that? Those are signs that we're in a new age and maybe relying on old maps and that the bottom's falling out and that there's more being drained than what's going in. And you need replenishment. How much does Scripture talk about Jesus as the living water? Psalms 1 talks about the righteous are like a tree planted beside a stream, and its root structure is deep. Ephesians 3 is Paul's writing about, and he's giving us this imagery of I pray that you be strengthened in your inner person. In John 7, it's that it compares Jesus to he's living, breathing water. Jesus talks about, I am the bread. John 15, and he's talking about, I'm the vine and you are the branches. What is that? It's access to nourishment and replenishment. And the deepest source of your healing is in connection to God. I want you to think about your life for a second. And I want you to, if you take notes, which is 4 of you, which is okay. It's all right, whatever. I'm just saying, take some notes. I work hard. Let's make it about me. Your personhood, God says, is this too scattered for you all? Or are you all right? All right, cool. Don't care. I do. You have to know if you knew. God says, the greatest command is love God with all your heart, your mind, in the Western church. There we are, heart and mind, we're good. But he also says your soul, your spirit. And what happens when trust is broken down between you and God, and trust is broken down with other people, and all of a sudden you become the litmus test to trust in life, and you discover that how am I supposed to love God, myself, and others when I'm struggling with trust? And trust is happening in distance, and distance is creating constant worry, and the worry is draining me, and I'm depleted, and I need replenished. God, your entire personhood is meant to be connected. And I want you to think about yourself in 3 layers. Think of yourself at the level of shallows, and in the midlands, and in the depths. And in the shallows is where most of us live our life. I used the imagery several weeks ago about living life on the upper decks of the Titanic. Same idea. The shallows is where you and I exist every day. It's just the normal chaos and distractions of daily life. It's the normal stuff. It's the fragmentation of our attention. It's just all the day-to-day. But down underneath that is a little bit more nuanced. This is where your cares happen. And the Midlands is your cares. This is where you're like, I'm really worried about this. This is where there becomes a little bit more kind of fault and responsibility that's happening. Like, hey, someone broke this, or I messed up, and I'm carrying that in the Midlands. This is the deeper worries and concerns. But then there's the depths. And that's the place of like all the eternal stuff that's hard to articulate, the stuff that's like where love comes from, stuff where you experience it, the stuff where joy is, where you feel it and understand it. You don't really know exactly how it comes and goes for you, maybe, but like I know when that's off. And then there's the place where there's hope. And what we're prone to do is live at the shallows. And I don't even mean that like totally as a way of fault, but like the world is organized to live at the shallows when all of the depth is waiting for us. And I'm going to tease out this illustration probably past the point of its limits, but let's just say this. You're sitting in your bathtub. The shallows is like a trickle of water. Living life at the trickle is like a full open drain at the bottom, but just a trickle coming out. You work and work and work and work, and it's a constant 24/7 trickle. But the depths is when you open up that faucet in some deep, abiding, life-changing connection to a deeper source. And Jesus is like this endless well that if we can learn what it means to relate at the depths and turn our attention to God, that is where you will find this new form of resilience and what it means to navigate this new dimension, or this new reality. And there's more I could say about all that, but here's the pastoral word on that front, and then I want to shift gears, is that I want to help be part of not extracting value from you for the sake of our church, but I want to be part of imparting value to your life that helps you learn how to turn the faucet on at full capacity. And your life just be filled with the depths of knowing God. And out of that knowing God, you are so passionate for what's on the heart of God and what's on the mind of God that you can't help but to serve God and make bigger and bigger impact in your life. And in that journey is healing and wholeness and depths of life that you never imagined possible. And that's the personal dimension. But let's talk about the church for a second. Is that okay? Great. I want to articulate a few things just to be clear about who we are for a second. We believe that transformation happens in stages. It happens over time. It happens in community, all in alignment to Jesus. But in that journey, there are particular stages. I think each one of us experienced a version of this, that there's a part of that journey where we just need the sense of belonging to God, belonging to one another, that creates the opportunity for something different. Let's name it as belonging, believing, and then becoming like Jesus. Belonging, believing, and becoming like Jesus. And our why, the thing that drives everything that you see and will see, and that will drive the things that we're going to continue to talk about over the course of the summer and the fall with big things, big changes, big things you see, big things that are going to be asked of us, asked of you, is that we want to help people navigate that journey through belonging and believing and becoming like Jesus. And to do that, we have to realize that we're in an ice age. And we're going to have to adapt. We're going to be a little bit flexible. We're going to have to match whatever is efficient and effective to meet people where they are with the heart of why we do things. We need to change. We need to change. And we're facing a new reality, and we're facing it in a new world with new needs, and it was going to require new things of us. And let me ask this, but why, Matt? Why? Why are you about to drop things on us? It feels like it's about to get icky around here. I like things as they've been. I'm here, aren't I? Like, why and for who? Well, let me name it. We have a development and formational crisis with our kids. It's for them. It's for them. The kids and the students and the families in our community need us. They need you. And if we keep navigating life and trying to point them to God using old maps, what are we doing? Why are we here? It's going to lead to long-term navigational consequences. We have more information now. We know more things. We don't know about the long-term effects of where we've been, but we know it is affecting us. And we know that there is crises after crises of trust in institutions and people and churches and Christians. We know there's crises after crises that leads to issues of mental health, struggles with mental health. We know more about how our phones and entertainment and other things help us, and they break us, and they hurt us. We know about other lead factors that just shape a kid. And let me just say it, it's not theoretical. If there's any teachers in the room, give me your biggest head nods, or people that work with kids, this isn't a theoretical thing that's coming down the line. The ice age is here, and it's cold outside. Cold. Hypothermia of the soul happening around us with the next gen. It's not a future challenge to navigate or obstacle to overcome. Tanya's nodding her head. I can't tell you the sort of stuff that she's seeing earlier and earlier and earlier in pre-K environments about just the impact of stuff that, even not on a scale of intense childhood trauma, just a new reality for a kid to navigate. It's profound. And according to recent Barna research, this probably isn't surprising, but 64% of students are leaving the church after high school, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Barna has also said things like a kid's worldview, a student's worldview is primarily shaped and it's in place by the time someone reaches age 13. So what's the window of time that we have to really make a lasting impact and to set things up for the future generation? Doesn't mean that that they have to have it all and that they are not going to have things to work through and change and flex down the road and grow into and grow from. But the window is small. And childhood is disappearing. The idea that we have these conversations as young adults in our college ministry, you can throw that to the window. What you're thinking about, your 4-year-old, your younger kid is thinking about. Your early elementary age kid is thinking about and seeing things. There's no hiding it. There's no level of bubble wrap. So let's get real. It's a new ice age. We're in a new reality. We have to change. We have to think about things differently. We're up against a deadline, my friends, and it's earlier than we thought. And here's something else. Well, I just said it. This technology is so beautiful, but it is accelerating everything. Our kids are being formed at a rapid rate at a younger age than we ever thought. And we have to think differently. We have to act differently. We have to become something different. We have to become a different kind of follower of Jesus, a different kind of church, a different kind of parent, a different kind of person in our singleness, a different kind of place where generations get connected and that we care about this. And we must begin with the assumption. We must begin with the assumption that, how do I say this? Sundays and whatever else we can add to the calendar, as good as it could be, Wednesdays, small groups, Christian school, daycare, a camp, even all that is not enough. If that means we are outsourcing the formation of our community to people we pay to do it. They need us. They need you. They need every one of us to get in the game. And you're like, man, is this a really dramatic plea for help on the Faith Kids team? 17 layers down. I'm asking us to be a different kind of people that think holistically about 30 years down the road, that if we don't adjust to the ice age we're in now, problems. And it's like, if you're working with kids and you're thinking about it and you're a parent, I know you're anxious. I know you lack self-confidence. I know that you're questioning everything. I know that the tendency there is to tighten the grip and go back to the old maps that used to work. And whether they work or not, I know they did at some point, and I find safety in that. Embrace a Google Earth reality. Embrace a new world. the question must be, what is the most effective way to help the kids and the students in this new reality? And embrace it for what it is. Belong, believe, become. For the sake of who? For the sake of the next generation. For the sake of our students, for the sake of our families. But not just them, for their parents, for you, for our families. And so what are we going to do? You're going to hear more and more. You're like, why are you talking about vision on July 4th? Because I'm about to leave town and I'm dumping some things on you, and you can process it, and I'm going to come back and dump some more. We need to get focused on two things this fall. We need to get focused on Sundays. We need to get focused on this. Not just programs, as good as it is. Not just teams, as much as we need that and we want it, because we need to answer the belonging question. You need to know you belong here by participating here and helping someone else belong. We need you in the game. We need you. You need you. You need this. Not to get value from you, but for you to find more value in yourself and in this whole thing. You need this. Get in the game for the sake of a lot of reasons. But we need that so we can answer the deeper belonging question, because if someone's going to give God a shot, they have to give us a shot first. And if we don't give them a shot, and if we don't communicate who we are, and if we don't do that in loving, accepting, beautiful ways that help people be known, and it's excellent, and it's environments, and it's teams, and it's flourishing, and it looks and feels different, and it's motivated because we're in an ice age, and we are married to being effective about making disciples and helping people map their journey and become like Jesus and find all the goodness and living in the depths of what that is. We need to focus on Sundays. But more than that, as good as that is, we want to create space to encounter God on Sundays. Not just to do songs and hear talks, but to find God, to experience a living, present, powerful, healing God, because the deepest longing of your heart at the depths of who you are is actually to know and be known by God. If you're here in this room, you may not have words for it, but you're here because you want to know God. You want to be known by God. How do we do that? That's the question to be answered. It's a focus on Sundays, to help people belong, to communicate a message before the message that says, you have a Heavenly Father that loves you, and that Jesus is Lord, and the Holy Spirit is with you, and you belong here. And then in your lifelong journey to become more like Jesus, do it with us. And we face the realities of a new world. And we're going to do that with you. We get to set the stage, and we get to lead people to Jesus. And it's not just with a focus on Sundays, but it's with, numbers 2, a focus on community. We figure out how to make this. And that's an ask that's coming your way as well. What does it mean to get in teams and community so that the space, here's a lie. The only way to the path towards self-care is self-centered. I believe in self-care. I can talk about that for hours if you want through a Christian lens and what that means and tying it to the ancients, and it's beautiful, and we're going to do it over the course of a lifetime. But the lie about self-care is that it leads to self-centeredness. Beauty of self-care is that you can't practice self-care without caring for others as well. Let me tie that again. You didn't get it. You didn't like it. Caring for yourself is only possible when you care for others. You can't find what you need for you disconnected from other people. The new ice age has removed that equation. It's weaponized people. And it's made us divide over things out there, and we've lost trust in institutions, but we lost people in the trust in people's beside you. What do you think about this? Did you wear a mask? You wore it a month longer than I prefer. So you're definitely a fear-based person, and you're written off, right? Like, hogwash. We desperately need to rebuild connection around here, and we need your help. Just laying it out. And your connectedness with each other is connected to you're connected with yourself, and you're connected with God's. And I'll be done in a second. But the ultimate goal is that God would change us. As we're changing, we would be used to change the world. Our own lives, our families, and this community. And I don't know, I can't get away from an image that I've had in my head all week. of the cross, I don't know how to think about the future. I don't know how to think about what it means to know God and be known by God. I don't know what it means to navigate the struggle and the burnout and the hurt, and the breaches of trust, and the hang-ups and the distractions without recentering my perspective on the cross of Jesus. Because in that pivotal moment, there's a very human thing that happened that I can't stop meditating about. It's that Jesus, who lived this life of high impact, lived in community, modeled the way for us, gave us teachings, performed miracles, didn't sin, did the whole thing, and you can wrap all the theology around that. Humbled himself to take upon this cross and walk a journey that was meant for us, and with every right not to do it based on the logic. He had no defensiveness. Think about that. He wasn't defensive and fighting for himself in the moment that he unlocked the thing that has changed the course of history. I just have to think about the path for transformation for us. And it doesn't mean that the hurt doesn't go away instantly, whatever you're facing. It doesn't mean that the anger doesn't come and go, and boy, will it. It doesn't mean that everything gets instantly restored or that your intellectual hang-ups, all those loose ends get tied up. But if we can look at Jesus and say, in that moment for him, he wasn't defensive, I think there's something in that for us. And I don't know what that is. I'm just letting that leave out there for a second. There's no defensiveness in Jesus. And I have to ask, we had that moment of prayer and reflection earlier, and I'm praying that God really met you there and some things came up, and you can take that with you. But as you leave this place, and the temptation becomes, be like, yeah, but I'm going to go back there because that's where it's comfortable. I like what you said about kids, but yeah, I don't want to see any changes. And we go back to the boat. I like what you said, and that feels nice. And I want to be part of a church that's doing good and has big impact. But I really would prefer that it looks and feels and talks and we do the same thing forever. Or I want that for my kids, but I don't want to give it away. I know this may sound guilty, but I'm just being I want you to think of that through the lens of the cross, where there was humility and no defensiveness, and it was love that caused him to step out and take for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. And instead of being angry about going back to the boat or someone else going back to the boat, be like, you know what? It's another invitation. It's a deeper invitation to the healing and the wholeness and the good that's to come on it. And so at a personal dimension, wrestle with that this week for you. Pray about it. Reflect upon it. Keep praying that prayer, Jesus, I give everyone and everything to you. The second part, pray Jesus, heal my union with you. But as a church, I want to be perfectly clear, that there is no lengths that we will not go. No lengths that we will not go to help people find Jesus, to be known by Jesus, to help navigate a new world, to find belonging and work through belief and become more like Jesus. There's no lengths we will not go to do that for us and for this community and eventually for the world. So prepare for uncomfortableness, but fueled by love. And you're like, what does this mean? Stick around. See you in a couple weeks. And I'll just end with this. The Father loves you, and Jesus is Lord of all, and the Holy Spirit is with you. You heard nothing else? The Father loves you today. Jesus is Lord of all in every situation and everything you're walking through. And the Holy Spirit is with you. Keep dipping. Don't give up. Stick around. Get in the game. And I really do. I'm so thankful for what God's putting before us. Let's go there together. And God wants to bring more value to you as you give more value to others. Would you stand and let's pray? Father, here we are trying to navigate a new world, a new reality. Here we are on a July 4th weekend. Here we are with our own hurts. Here we are with our struggles. Here we are in just our own humanity. Here we are with our feelings and our thoughts. God, I pray that you will just meet us where we are today. And I pray that you will tie these words together that we had this morning so that it is customly deposited into every human soul today. That through the process of this day, that you will help us to take steps in the direction that you're having for us, that you'll help us to begin to become more and more like you, that you will meet us where we are and that we will meet others where they are for the sake of their good, for the sake of this community, for the sake of everyone knowing what it feels like to be loved and known, and for them to find where they fit. Would you speak to the deeper depths of who we are today, and you'll bring peace and love and joy and contentment and hope where there isn't? God, I pray that you'll help us to manage things. Like, help us to get intentional about what's depleting us and what's filling us up. Help us to become knowledgeable of that. Help us to feel your presence and to encounter you and know you and just be captured by a vision for you and for our future and for our families and for the next generation and for the hurting and the deconstructing and the de-churched and the people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are right around us right now that are not here for very valid reasons that we want to meet and love and nurture and point to Jesus. God, I pray you'll help us to be humble, and you'll help us to approach this with motive, and that you'll unite us and you'll unify us and you'll continue to give us wisdom and strength. And for every human heart that's struggling this morning, Jesus, meet them. We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.